Okay. Thank you, Anna.
Okay.
Again, this is on Black history, but it's really about the Black cooperative movement. And so we'll cover some aspects of the movement. We'll talk about principles, cooperative principles, and we'll cover types of cooperatives. All right. So I got to share with you our big conference that's coming up in Las Vegas this year. The theme of this year's conference is Advancing Black Cooperative Economies Through Liberatory Practices. It'll take place June the 1st through June the 3rd in Las Vegas, Nevada at the Golden Nugget Hotel. So I encourage you to get registered. Early registration is going on now until the 13th of March. We have lined up a real great agenda for you, not only at the conference itself, but things outside the conference. So we'll get a chance to really see some of Black Las Vegas. So I'm really excited about it. Hope you can join us as well. All right. So our website will be up and running next week, early part of by midweek next week, it'll be up and running. So you're ready to go to the website and register and learn more about the speakers and the sessions that we're planning to have at this year's National Conference on Black Cooperative Agenda. All right. Okay, what we plan on covering this session, again, we're going to have a discussion about what is a cooperative. We're going to cover the Black cooperative movement, cooperative principles, and types of cooperatives. So I'm hoping to get through all of this in this 2-hour frame. And if I don't, you'll get the copy of this presentation to go over yourself, but hopefully I'll get through most of this evening. Any questions? All right, let's get started. What is a cooperative? A cooperative is a business that's voluntarily owned and controlled by the people using its services. Simply put, it may be operated as a nonprofit or a for-profit entity. Can you go back, Anna? Okay. So, did anyone think a cooperative was more than this or less than this?
Well, I didn't realize until today, with the pre-materials that you sent, that there are nonprofits that develop profit-making cooperatives.
Yes.
I thought they were all profit-making.
Mm-hmm.
But there are some nonprofits that are involved
That's
in
right.
cooperative work, even if it's just incubating
right.
new efforts. So that was new to me today.
Okay. All right. Well, great. Did everyone get a chance to read since everybody they brought it up, to read the materials or see the videos that were sent out?
Yes, did that today.
Okay, good. All right, well, great. Well, that's what a cooperative is. It's a business that's voluntarily owned and controlled by the people using it. And that's what a cooperative is. And it can be for-profit or nonprofit. It can be money-making or non-money-making entities. All right, next slide, Anna. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the Black cooperative movement, because cooperatives aren't really new to Black folks, because we came from Africa with a concentric way of how we work collectively together. And so even as indentured servants in the 17th century, Black folks were working cooperatively to get together. So the first organized cooperative was formed by African-American women in South Carolina at the Camaby River Colony. And they grew cotton on abandoned farmlands that were were there, and they remained independent and became really how to say, really grew the cooperative work that they were doing. And again, they weren't calling it cooperative at the time. It was just collective work that people were doing to serve, to help each other. Now, after the Civil War, Black farmers started the Colored Farmers National Alliance and Cooperative Union, where Southern Farmers Alliance would not admit Black farmers except in separate chapters. By 1891, the cooperative had more than 1 million members. And you may see some of this in the movie, The Great Debaters. When that scene when Denzel was organizing the farmers, and this is an extension of that work that came years later in terms of the movement to organize farmers into collective bargaining, so they could collectively bargain for better wages and better proceeds from the farmers themselves. Go ahead, Anna. Next one. Okay, my let me move my camera. Okay, let me move it here. Okay, so African American activists were inspired by the cooperative principles set out by the Rockdale Society of Equitable Pioneers. Now, in 1844, in England, they started to frame this work, this service work, as cooperatives. And so the Rockdale folks, which were white Europeans, sort of took hold and sort of talk themselves to be the modern white cooperative movement. But again, this came on the heels of a Black movement that already had started. So by 1896, the Cooperative Union was gone. But in 1922, the National Federation of Colored Farmers formed to increase Black farm ownership and improve farm business through cooperative buying. And so this group, the 1922 group, was a forerunner for the Southern Cooperative Land Group that's operating now, that Ella Baker, that Fannie Lou Hamer has started. So that was a forerunner. Next slide, Anna. So in the 1880s, again, the colored farmers, they were working to collectively pool their resources, working on a plantation as sharecroppers. Some of them working sharecroppers, but they were really putting their knowledge together, their agricultural knowledge together, to really try to get the best yield they could out of the land, but also to get the best prices they could for their produce. Anna, go ahead. All right. So we moved from the 1880s into the early turn of the century, the 1900s. And so in 1901, in Roofville, Virginia, the Black operated the Mercantile Cooperative Company, which was established in 1901. And it was a successful cooperative that existed. And they raised money to buy a school. They hosted study groups. And this is what really cooperative work was about. And so they understood that they had to educate themselves, and they hosted study groups and evening classes, and were building out what they could be the forerunner of the modern day Black cooperative movement. So many Black-owned consumer cooperatives were established at the end of the 19th century and the first half of the 20th century, grocery stores, gas stations, and we'll get into some of that. But I want you to understand that this movement around cooperatives has long been established from pre-slavery to post-slavery. And blacks had always worked in collective organizations, helping each other. All right. So W.E.B. Du Bois, who was one of the major black intellectuals during that time, in 1907, he wrote a piece called Economic Cooperation Among Negroes, where he explored mutual aid societies and beneficial societies, and did some research on black cooperatives at the time. So Du Bois was a intellectual thinker, and had the vision to understand that there was a ecosystem, and this is where now the ecosystem now becomes thorough in terms of developing an ecosystem for blacks in the cooperative movement. Go ahead, Anna. Okay. And at that time, he documented 154 black-owned cooperatives. And that was really something that he did. And so he published this book called The Economic Cooperation Among Negroes. And Nick, you can still get this, pull it offline, because I did, and I'll share it with you, where he really did the work of terms of researching and documenting black cooperatives at the turn of the century. And his work really led to, again, provided cooperative economic education and inspired black leaders to start consumer cooperatives in their own communities. So Du Bois was really you want to label him, you can label him the father of the black cooperative movement. All right. So we moved from 1907 to 1918, where Du Bois founded the Negro Cooperative Guild to provide cooperative economics education and inspire black leaders to start consumer cooperatives in their communities. And one of the cooperatives that inspired by the guild was Citizens Cooperative stores in Memphis, Tennessee. And if you think about Memphis, Tennessee, during that time, it was a highly charged racial city to be in. A highly charged city for blacks to espouse independence. So in the 1920s, moving from Du Bois 1918 to 1920, Booker T. Washington developed the Black Negro Business League, and where he brought black merchants together to form co-ops and work together around groceries. And so what we're seeing is the movement for blacks taking their skills from an agricultural landscape into business. That's what we're seeing now. Again, because blacks had worked the land and as slaves and had accumulated so many skills, farming and cultivating land, that they could take that skill and take it into business, and which they did. Here's a picture of the officers of the National Negro Business League at Indianapolis in 1904. You see Booker T. Washington here in the center, right there. Right here is Booker T. Washington, and you see again the business leaders of that time in terms of that was a part of the Negro Business League. And the Negro Business League is still operating today. I didn't know that until a couple of years ago that I met the president at a convening here in Washington. So it's still operating today.
There used to be a Baltimore chapter that I don't think is operating now, but I was a part of it many
okay.
years ago. Yes.
All right. Well, you know, in again, 1918, we moved now into the early 20s, and we see the work that went into Tulsa, Oklahoma. And so Black Wall Street now has emerged. And they had a co-op as well in that community. And they had, of course, you know, the insular economics about Black Wall Street was that Blacks worked for white folks, but spent their money in Black stores. And that's what really, I think, you know, gets missed about Black Wall Street is that Blacks work for whites, but they spent their money in Black stores, and so they were able to build up an economic platform and call it Black Wall Street at the time. Next slide, Anna. So in Black Wall Street, there were 600 businesses, 21 churches, 21 restaurants, 30 grocery stores, 2 movie theaters, 6 private airplanes, 1 hospital, 1 bank, and its own school system. It has not been replicated since. Has not been replicated since. And it just, the history, you know, got told, another history of Wall Street got told back in 2020 as it's a pandemic erupted and we start to revisit the history of racism in the country. We unfolded the story of Black Wall Street again, and why it was important to share the roots of that story among ourselves as Blacks. But they were prosperous. They were prospering. 600 businesses. Can you imagine that? 600 businesses? 600 businesses. 6 private airplanes. They were highly motivated people.
Yeah, rocking and rolling.
Rocking and rolling, that's right. Rocking and rolling. Go ahead, Anna, next slide. Okay, so we move from enslavement to post-enslavement to Jim Crow. And so in Jim Crow, there were just laws that prohibited Blacks from doing anything in most states. And in the District of Columbia, there was a gentleman who was a Kansas senator at the time, representing, he headed the District of Columbia committee to, and he was really instrumental. His name was James Arthur Clapper, and he was really instrumental in moving legislation to allow Blacks to form co-ops in the District of Columbia. And so he sponsored the Clapper-Volstead Act of 1922 and legalizing cooperative marketing and producers associations, and these laws allow farmers to form cooperatives to market their own goods rather than at the whim of larger corporate distributors. So again, you know, one of the things that Mr. Clapper did was really elevate Blacks in terms of in the District of Columbia around cooperatives. And so this really seeded a lot of work that went on in later years in terms of building out the framework for cooperatives in the District of Columbia. And we'll talk about that later. But put a placeholder on Arthur Clapper and what he did in terms of allowing legislation to allow Blacks to own their own cooperative businesses. All right, Anna. So, so in 1930, they formed the Young Negro Cooperative League, was founded by Ella Baker. And anyone familiar with who Ella Baker is?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Mm-hmm.
You can unmute yourself. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Snick.
Yeah. That's right, Snick. That's right. That's right. That's right. That's right. But Ella was the national director for the youth program under the NAACP. But also she had working with young Negroes. She established the Young Negro Cooperative League in 1930. And so again, here we are in the movement. So again, we're moving from slavery to post-slavery to Jim Crow, and now we're peeping through the veil of the 1930s and the work that Ella Baker is doing with young folks. Mm-hmm. Go ahead, Anna. Yeah. So this is a picture of Ella Baker. Yeah. Yeah, she was a real organizer, a true organizer. And she did wonderful work in terms of around young people. Go ahead, Anna. Mm-hmm. And this is the Wedge Community Food Co-op in Minneapolis, and just to show you again how this cooperative model was being utilized, and again mostly around food. Again, using our skills that we develop as sharecroppers to grow food for white producers. We begin to grow food for Black folks and bring that food into markets. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we moved through the 30s with Ella Baker establishing the youth movement, and we now enter into the civil rights era and the Black cooperative movement. And in the 60s and 70s, there was a quilting bee that was founded as a member of the Federation of Southern Cooperative, which is still operating today. And again, the Federation was created to promote cooperative economic development as a strategy and philosophy to support and sustain Black farmers' ownership and control over land, and to support the economic viability of family and independent farm businesses. And this Federation is still operating today after 50, I think they just celebrated their 60th year. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes, Kimberly, yeah, most farmer markets are co-ops, you're right. So in 1967, 5 major civil rights organizations worked together to form the Federation of Southern Cooperatives. And again, Fannie Lou Hamer was a big player in that. Mm-hmm. Yep. Here's a quote from Fannie Lou Hamer on her Freedom Farm Cooperative. If you give a hungry man food, he will eat. But if you give him land, he will grow his own food. And so that's really what this cooperative movement was about, when the food was the ownership of land. It was about the ownership of land and being able to grow your own substance. Okay. Okay. In 1966, community organizers on Capitol Hill worked with the Greenbelt Consumer Cooperative. The Greenbelt Consumer Cooperative is one of the oldest in the country. It was developed in 1930s with the help of Eleanor Roosevelt. And so they do have their cooperative housing there in Greenbelt. They have a grocery store on campus. And if you ever get a chance to visit it, please take advantage if you're in the area of in Maryland, around Greenbelt, to go there and visit, because it's really says something about sustainable cooperatives. Mm-hmm. The Poor People's Campaign, 1968, and I'm quite sure all you historians are familiar with the Poor People's Campaign. That was a campaign that was organized by Dr. King to bring attention to the war in Vietnam by bringing poor people to Washington, D.C. to camp out, to show their discontent with the use of federal dollars to fight a war as opposed to addressing poverty. Mm-hmm. So in the late 1960s, there were Black persons like Cornelius Cornbread Givens, who was an advocate for creating cooperatives in DC and across the US. Givens was a Southerner who came north in the movement of Poor People's Campaign and stayed here. But also too, he was a real pioneer when it came to working the idea of cooperatives. So while they were in this encampment in the Poor People's Campaign, because they had camped out on the lawn on the grounds of the Capitol. It was a muddy 3 or 4 days. But in that whole 3 or 4 days, they organized and came up with the Poor People's Development Foundation. And so this foundation was focused on delivering co-op education, bringing farmers' produce from the southern states up into northern markets. And so they did a lot of work around cooperatives. And Marion Barry was thrusted in the office of mayor on the back of a campaign that he would create co-ops in the District of Columbia. And that was all spearheaded by Cornbread Givens. Mr. Givens died about 15 years ago here in the district, and the conference that we are hosting takes the name from their conference, the National Conference on Black Cooperative Agenda. So I'm really happy to extend the work that they did back in 1968 and up into the 80s till they were disbanded. Go ahead, Anna. Here's a picture of Cornbread Givens right here to the left, to the right. Yeah, that's him. Mm-hmm. And that's a food co-op they had in the District of Columbia. I forget the name of it, but it was operating for a number of years in Southeast DC. Go ahead, Anna. And again, here's a picture of Marion Barry and Ivanhoe Donaldson, and I don't know who the other gentleman is. But again, they were very instrumental in planting in Barry's run for mayor in 1980 a whole platform around cooperatives. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So Cornbread Givens worked, endlessly and tirelessly around this whole thought of creating co-ops. And he felt like co-ops could serve particularly Blacks in poor communities in terms of creating parity around economics. He was also a social action platform attached to it, housing. Credit unions, he had a really large vision about how he saw co-ops. And eventually, in 1978, working with other stakeholders in the cooperative movement, they were able to get past in 1978, a Congress passed a law to create the only national bank that still exists in this country. And the bank was called the National Consumer Cooperative Bank. And so in 1978, they moved, they got the legislation passed. And I'm told by one vote. And Jimmy Carter at the time, I'm told they didn't support it, but it passed by one vote. And so now that bank, the Consumer Cooperative Bank, is now named the National Cooperative Bank. Some of you may have heard the name before, but they're still operating. They're doing a lot of work in upscale neighborhoods, and sort of kind of mission drift around their work that put them into marginalized communities. So they still got some work to do in terms of how they see themselves and the work that they're doing. But in 78, the law was passed. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So the Poor People's Development Foundation just sought to help poor communities develop cooperatives. And so they were, ahead of their time, I guess you could call them. They really worked to educate and embed the cooperative model in Black and poor communities particularly around the Eastern Seaboard. Mm-hmm. Baynard Ruskin, and for those who historians know that he was one of the organizers of Dr. King's 63 March, and he was forced out of that march because of the fact that he was gay. And so, but he never stopped organizing. He worked with Cornbread Givens in terms of developing the Poor People's Development Foundation. And so what he said that we need in every community a group of angelic troublemakers. Yeah. Bernard Ruskin. Mm-hmm. All right. So let's take a step back. And I ran through that sort of kind of quickly. But let's take a step back and ask ourselves some questions.
Kimberly has a question, actually.
Kimberly, yeah, you can unmute yourself, please. Unmute yourself.
I don't have a question. I have more of a comment. It's so much of our history that we don't know, right? And that we've never been taught. Because these are the kind of things, I'm just sitting here thinking and listening to all of this, and how much information that we has been kept from us, or we just haven't been able to seek it or just don't know about it. But how powerful it would be teaching this to our children so that they can get the concept, right, of us investing in us. Because we spend a lot of money in other areas and with other people, and not really circling our money back into our community, but how powerful that would be. So that's just what's going through my mind right now as you're talking about all of this.
Yeah.
So that was just a thought.
Yeah. Well, good thought, because I about 2 years ago, when I first thought to have a conference on Black cooperatives, I did some research, and behoove me, even today, I don't know where I got it, but a microfiche letter popped up that was from the Poor People's Development Foundation talking about their work. And their work in terms of also their work in terms of developing the processes to establish the National Consumer Cooperative Bank. And I'm saying, whoa. So in getting this information, I being who I am, I called the bank and asked them why wasn't this story being told on their website? And I challenged them. To tell the story, because it goes back to what you're saying, Kimberly. If Black folks knew that we had did so much work around cooperatives, I mean, it would be an easy task right now to educate us about cooperatives. But not knowing, we seemingly think we're starting from scratch, and in the knowledge space, as opposed to the space of equity, where we are coming to the space knowing that we had influences and we had input in the work. Elizabeth, go ahead.
I wanted to ask a question because I know I used to work for a bank, and to me, when they passed that law, it was easier to determine because banks were actually in your community. And now, because everything is so online and electronic and stuff like that, I think that was more of a way that they creatively positioned themselves, that they didn't participate in being able to give the resources back to us. Because I remember back in the day with that Community Act about how these banking institutions were supposed to be viable in the Black community. They were visible. You could go to the bank and, really be able to encourage them to reinvest back into your community. But then all of a sudden it changed around, and then you only saw ATM machines, and you really didn't see the Community Investment Acts as much as we should have.
Yeah. I worked in a district of Columbia back in the late 80s. And when I came in to work for a nonprofit, the National Consumer Bank was where we got all our funding from to do affordable housing here in the District of Columbia. And so from about, I guess, 80, 87, 88 to about right now, they went through mission drift. They forgot who and why they was established. They were established to provide financing in marginalized Black and poor communities. Now, they're doing co-op financing. Let me be wrong now. They're doing co-op, but they're doing it in upscale communities, as opposed to the original mission to do it in low to marginalized communities. And so I challenged them. And it's just recently have they included in their website information about the Poor People's Development Foundation. They don't call it that, but they allude to civil rights leaders and they work in terms of helping to form the bank. Yeah. Go ahead.
And then I think, again, as a community person, we really have to make sure that we're focused, because when you're saying they should reinvest into a community, and even when we have uprise, it's like we burn down our own community, So it's like they kind of saying, okay, if you want us to reinvest in your community, we have to have a community that has a mindset that they look at it as their community. Because if you reinvest and you have people who don't see businesses and homes something that they value and want to be a part of, then you have a tendency to have these companies, because they still are business, have the mindset that they're not going to be like, okay, you can say anything you want to, but we're not crazy. We're not just giving money to communities who don't want to really understand that they should take this opportunity and this value and really become the homeowners, the businesses, the institutionals. And I would like to be able to figure out, again, we do more of that, and we have to use more technology, because the banks are not as visible in our community, but yet they hold all of our resources. So we have to figure out, again, how we can connect our community to something that they see visible and hold that visibility of those institutions accountable as we do move forward with how we can, strengthen ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Is there some questions in the chat? Okay. Oh. Okay, Asia McGinnis. I agree fully. My parents took me to a place like Allensworth Town as a kid. Can you, Asia, talk a little about Allensworth Town? Asia, are you there? Okay. Yeah, I'm interested in to hear. Yeah. Elizabeth said the Poor People's Campaign has been revived. Yes, but not with the same.
Oh, I'm here. I'm sorry. I was just getting my son off the bus.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, no. Colonel Allensworth, he has a town. It's in, like, I want to say it's close to like Barstow, Bakersfield area. And it was just an awesome experience. They taken me several other places, but they took me there when I was like 7 or 8, and then they ended up taking my whole elementary class when I was like 9, and we took a whole group of Black kids from the area, and they got to go experience it. It was a town established by him. He brought a plot of land, and it was owned by him. They had houses, they had schools, they had a mail post office system. They had everything. They actually have an annual Juneteenth celebration there. I don't know if they still do it, but I believe they had one right before the pandemic started. But it's just an awesome experience. I low-key want to have something there one year, since this is all inspiring. Everything that I've been getting into, dabbling into the past year has been inspiring. But it is another way to show Black people, like, it would be awesome, like a great field trip to take people who are unaware and see that they have been doing it for, like you said, since the 1700s. I believe let me look up when he actually established the town. Let me see. Now you putting me to the test. I shouldn't have said nothing. I believe it says that he was established in 1908.
Oh, goodness.
Let me see. Hold on, no, let me go right back here. Yeah, in 1908 in Tulare County. It's about 30 miles north of Bakersfield. And like I said, there were several public buildings, and you get to walk around the town. The whole town is like a museum. You get to go walk up to his house. You get to see everyone else's houses. You can go in the church and the school. It's like I said, it was an awesome experience. I've been several times, and it's something that it inspired me, and that's what made me want to be a business owner, because I was like, if Black people could have a whole town, I also knew about Black Wall Street at 7. So people were like, who are you? Like, you're like a Black diamond in the rough, because the kids don't usually talk about this stuff. But I do feel like we need to make everyone aware, because that would empower a lot of people if they knew what greatness we came from. That's all.
So true. Ashe. Yeah. It's empowering to know, and it's empowering to know when you've made contributions, and so there's so much negativity coming from the dominant society around Black folk, as if we didn't do anything. But when you research the history, and the history got unveiled during this pandemic, that we've done everything. We've done everything, and yet we still find ourselves at the lower realm of economics in this country. And so that's why I believe that co-ops not the total answer, but can be an answer to uplifting the Black community, not only just economically, but spiritually as well, because it brings people together to work across their common differences and work together. Mm-hmm. So let's go down and look at some of these international cooperative values. Now, these cooperative values weren't put together by Blacks; they were put together by whites out of the Rockdale sort of thinking. But let's take a look at them. Okay, so equity, carry businesses in a way that is fair and unbiased. Equality, each member has a right to be treated the same and with respect. Self-help, help people while they help themselves by working together. Self-responsibility, take responsibility for and answer to actions. Democracy, give members an equal say and a right to contribute. And solidarity, share interests, common purpose with members and other cooperatives. And so I think these 6 values sort of cross over in terms of the work that we see that's necessary in the Black community and regarding our work around cooperatives. But I'll share my thoughts around the Nugasaba principles. Can you change? Okay. So the Afrocentric principle of Nugasaba. Everybody, well, anyone want to talk about knowing these principles? Are you practicing them? Are you made aware of them? Yes. Yeah, go ahead, Asia. Yeah, okay, so.
Oh, yes. You said you wanted me to speak. Yeah, no, my family has practiced these since I was a little kid, since before I was a little kid.
Yeah, the principle of Nugasaba requires the principles. Developed by Brother Ron Karinga. And so the first principle is Umoja, unity, to strive for and maintain unity in the family, community, race, and nation. Principle 2 is Kunkatakalia, self-determination, to define ourselves, create for ourselves, and speak for ourselves. Principle 3, Ujima, collective work and responsibility, to build and keep our community together, to make our brothers and sisters' problems our problems, and to solve them. Principle 4, Ujama, cooperative economics, to build and manage our own stores, shops, and other businesses, and to profit from them together. Number 5, Nia, purpose, to make our collective vocation the building and developing of our community in order to restore our people to their traditional greatness. Principle 6 is Kumba, creativity, to always as much as we can in the way we can in order to leave our community more beautiful and beneficial than we inherited. And 7, Amani, faith, to believe with all our hearts in our parents, our teachers, our leaders, our people, the righteousness and victory of our struggle. I believe that if we incorporate these 7 principles around our cooperative work, goodness, what manifestations will we have? If we can just incorporate these 7 principles around our cooperative work. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You know what? I had another thought. I guess I'm thinking too much. I'm on my thinking mode tonight.
That's all right.
I used to work a lot in juvenile justice, right? Which was, and had a lot of, young Black boys. And it's amazing to me, as I'm sitting here thinking, right, is that how in systems we talk about, I think one of the things they talked about or they had incorporated into schools was called core values, right? So just imagine if this was a part of core values, right? maybe we wouldn't have so much violence amongst one another in our community. So that's just another thought. I just got my thinking head on. So as you talking about this stuff, my head is just like thinking about all these different things that not only can empower us, but also empower our youth so that we don't continue the cycle. Because we're going to have to, even though we know these things, that we don't empower and educate our youth, it turns into another cycle, you know? So I was just sitting here thinking like this would be powerful, you know, as they talk about core values and nonviolence and things of this nature. If they really knew some of these values and these principles and put them into practices, that it could reduce violence in our community, but also build wealth, but also self-esteem.
Have us practice a principle-centered life, a principle purpose life.
Exactly. Or at least start the journey to find out what your principles and your purpose is, because it takes a while for us to really sometimes pinpoint and figure out what the purpose is. But these kind of principles give you just an insight of working towards you figuring out what your purpose is.
Yes. Because
it took me a long time to figure it out. I don't even think I fully know, but I think I'm on the right track.
Well, Lynn says there's planting seeds, right? Planting seeds.
And I think it's important that whenever we do anything of a community nature, that we drill down to that there are more dimensions than just the surface thing that we're talking about. There's so many opportunities and teachable moments and learning conditions. There's a lot that has to be filled in the infrastructure of our consciousness of Black people, so that anytime we're doing any kind of program, whether it's cooperative, that's what I love about this. Look at all these different dimensions of what we're actually teaching and doing and serving, and you know, and that's as it should be. That's as it should be. We can't afford at this point to think one-dimensionally.
So
we got to get a lot of things done at the same time.
Yeah. I always say that we got to do organizing on steroids.
Yes.
Yeah. We got to move us like we have steroid injections, because we don't have time to build muscle. We need instantaneous muscle built. Yes. So you know, as you enter into your own consciousness in terms of the work that you're doing in terms of building out your team, because this really comes back to building out your team, is having principles around how you expect each other to coalesce and connect with the group. Because cooperatives, only function as effectively as the team functions. Let me say that again. They only function effectively as the team functions.
Yeah.
And when the team is dysfunctional, that's an antidote for a bad functioning cooperative. So you got to keep people connected. And so organizing, I'll share a story with you. There was a co-op grocery store that established itself about 4 years ago outside of Raleigh, and it went under. And so they had a webinar and with the founders talking about why do they think that they weren't successful. And one of the things that came up as the main thing was the fact that people didn't support the cooperative store because they didn't think they were members of the co-op. So what people did was they stopped organizing individuals. So if you're going to look at being a successful co-op, you always got to continue to organize and mobilize and educate. See, going back, looking at the movement, education was always a part of the pathway for building the cooperative model. It was education. During the early years, during the boys' years, it was education. Mm-hmm. No, I don't recall what the Antonia the name of the co-op, but I'll get it and then I'll share it with you. Yeah, it was very outside of Raleigh, way outside of Raleigh. Ed Whitfield was one of the principals who helped establish it. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'll get that. I'll get that. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so important to build within your co-op core principles about how you see yourselves functioning. All right. So let's go on to the next slide, Anna. So these are the Eurocentric cooperative principles. All right, because I want to get some balance here. So voluntary and open membership, anyone can join a co-op. They don't discriminate based on gender, social, racial, political, or religious factors. Well, I'm not saying that they don't, because I know they do. They do discriminate based on racial composition and gender as well. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Number 2, democratic member control. Members control their business by deciding how it's run and who leads it. Well, I say this here: if you are operating democratically and you make sure the democratic principles are a part of your decision-making process and you hold true to that, yes. But if you relinquish the control to a few people, then it's not being democratic. And that's sometimes what can happen in a group. Strong voices can rise up to the top and weak voices don't get heard. Mm-hmm. Number 3, members have economic participation. All co-op members invest in their co-op. This means people not shareholders benefit from a co-op's profit. And yes, that's the earmark of membership, because you have to should participate economically in investing in the co-op. Autonomy and independence for making business deals or raising money. Co-ops never compromise the autonomy or democratic member control. And again, I think that this is true in many regards, but you have to guard against it, because when you start looking at co-op and making money, and money seems to have a real control over people's psyche and how they see themselves. You know, you can be sort of outside the realm of being independent and be beholden to other folks. Go ahead, Anna. Number 5, education, training, and information. And this is really, I think this is the key to all work around cooperative, is to educate yourselves. Find training, information, because to effectively grow the cooperative, you need to be educated, because it's a business. It's a business, and that's the real thrust of it. It's a business, and businesses do grow, and business environment grows. So you have to be able to grow with your business if you are going to be vested in growing your cooperative. You have to be invested in education, training, and sharing and getting information. Cooperation among cooperatives. Co-ops believe that working together is the best strategy to empower their members and build a stronger co-op economy. And I'm a believer in that, that cooperation among cooperatives, in terms of empowering membership and building stronger economies. And concern for communities, co-ops are community-minded. They contribute to the sustainable development of the community by sourcing and investing locally. So those are the principles behind the Eurocentric principles, and you've got now the Afrocentric principles. And you may, see value in utilizing both. All right, go on, next slide, Anna. Okay, so business types of cooperatives. Well, there's retail cooperatives, hardware stores, food, agricultural products, movie theaters, all retail. They allow consumers the opportunity to supply their own needs, gain bargaining power, and share earnings. So that's one form of type of cooperative, a retail cooperative. So if you're looking at, selling something, then you're looking at retail. Worker cooperatives. Well, worker cooperatives are worker owners, and they're members of the co-op, but they're also workers that work for the co-op as well. So you can be both. You can be an owner and a worker, or you can be singly an owner or singly a worker. Mm-hmm. And so with that, large companies have an option of employee stock ownership plans called ESOPs. And we're going to have a panel discussion on ESOPs at the conference. And it means that employees own a stake in the business. And it's really how you can get stock in a business and take ownership of the business. So that's what a ESOP is. But ESOPs are different from worker owner cooperatives. Let me be clear, they're different. They're different. They're different. One's a stock option ownership, and the other is purely ownership. And when you don't have stock in the co-op. Producer cooperatives, again, think of agricultural products, lumber, crafts, anything that you can produce is a producer-owned cooperative. And you could be accommodating a producer cooperative and be accommodating a retail cooperative as well, because you can produce and you can sell. Do you agree with that? You can produce and sell and be a producer cooperative, and as well as being a retail cooperative. Mm-hmm. Service cooperatives, examples just child care, health care, clinics, funeral services. These are just services that you provide in the community, that you look at supplying the need in the community. And the last is housing cooperatives, which says that, allow home ownership the opportunity to share costs. And that's what cooperatives do in housing. You have shared costs. You own the building. You own a share of the building. You take on management of the building. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So those are 5 different types of co-ops. And so what kind of co-op are you looking to establish? And that's the question you need to ask yourself early on, in terms of what kind of co-op are you looking to establish yourself? Mm-hmm. So these are some Black cooperative movements. Mandela Groceries out in San Francisco area and Oakland, excuse me. Detroit Food Co-op up in Detroit. Ujima Collective is in Pittsburgh, and and Corporation Jackson, which is in Jackson, Mississippi. Here's some institutional cooperative businesses: Blue Diamond, Ace Hardware, Land O'Lakes, Ocean Spray, Gold Kiss. There are probably over 1,000 institutional cooperative businesses that are operating, and some of them that you probably have supported may not know that they're cooperative. Your credit union, if you're a member of a credit union, you're a member of a co-op. Right. Okay. So let's go up to the top and to the very top. Oh, this is, you know what? This is not the one I sent you. This is not the one I sent you.
That was the last one you sent me.
Hold on a second. Okay. 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 Thoughtful questions. I'd like you to take a moment just to answer one of these questions. Just take one and ask yourself the question, what's the one thing that brings you energy and joy? What makes you feel safe? What's your favorite self-care activity? What was the last thing that you fell in love with? Go ahead, take a shot at it. Ain't no wrong answer. It's your answer.
Do you want us to put it in the chat, or you want us to say it verbally?
No. Let's use the volume. Let's just use this platform.
Okay, so the one thing that brings me energy and joy is really when I can be in my community, educating people and giving them what I like to call aha moments. And what makes me feel safe, I don't know if I should say this on here, but what makes me feel safe is having a sense of knowledge, awareness, and some money in the bank. Or some money in the safe, money somewhere that I can get to real quick.
Okay. I hear you, Kimberly.
And I think when you say what's your favorite self-care activity, I think that's something that I'm still working on, because I think it's a challenge with a lot of us that do a lot of community work. Is sometimes we invest more into other people and other things and not so much into ourselves. So that's a challenge for me. So self-care, I would say I'm still working on it. And what was the last thing I fell in love with? And I would say my grandson, who will be 2 tomorrow.
Yes.
I mean, people talk about love and stuff, but you know, ain't no love like a little grandmama. He's just the little sweetest little thing. And so all these principles and things, so I'm redeveloping even kind of the things what I've taught my daughter, right? I'm more Afrocentric, I guess you could say, with him. So even thinking about homeschooling him so that I can teach him what needs to be taught, right? And have him in a safe environment and teach him all these principles and things that I'm learning at 50 something, right? That I should have learned a long time ago, but for whatever reason, it didn't happen. So just changing those dynamics. So that's what I'm really in love with right now.
All right.
That's nice.
You take a stab at these 4 questions, Reverend Burnett?
Say that again.
You want to take a stab at them?
There are so many things that bring me energy and joy. I'm telling you, if you are in my life and my world, you know that I get excited about everything. So I get energy and joy when I see that people are growing in consciousness around me. I'm growing and they're growing, and you know that brings me energy and joy to just be in a space where people are aware and conscious, and I'm engaging with them, and you know, and we're doing things together. It brings me energy and joy to just the thought that we're going to build this cooperative on around modalities for wellness. You know, that people will be able to find the possibility of being well when everything around them is telling them, here's something else that's going to kill me. They can find a message that says it's possible to be well. I feel safe. That's a spiritual issue for me. I feel safe in the consciousness of spirit, that that I'm a spiritual being in a spiritual universe that's governed by spiritual laws. Everybody doesn't necessarily see it that way, but that's what makes me feel safe. To live by truth principles. I feel safe when I'm doing that. My favorite self-care activity is having massages in exotic places in the world. I had a massage in New Delhi, India, with oils dripping down my face and on my third eye. And, you know, then I recently had a massage in Aruba that was also very different. And so I wherever I travel, I look for places that I can go to experience a new massage modality. And what's the last thing you fell in love with? Myself. I have been learning to love myself. And that is giving me the impetus to love everybody else. You know, when my grandson was born, I agree with, was it Kimberly who was saying that? I can remember the thought, I've fallen in love with life all over again. And now I discovered that I had not, for many years, have been very involved in community, have been very involved in helping other people. And within the last year or so, I really got it that I need to include myself in that agenda that I have for community and others, and include myself. And so I'm just learning to love myself. I'm just turned 71 years old, and I'm learning to love myself. And that's something, and I'm just grateful.
That's shame.
Ron, this is Jim.
Yes.
I can probably respond to 3 of these, I think. So the thing that brings me energy and joy is if I see that I may have played a positive role in helping somebody to grow and develop, and maybe go places or do things that didn't think they could do initially. And that just energizes me and brings me great joy. I think what makes me feel safe is when I demonstrate the power of truth principles to myself. When I demonstrate it in my life, it gives me a feeling of safety and assurance. And so my favorite self-care activity is I would call vibrational activation, uplift. And that is when I do various breathing techniques or approaches, when I do various self-empowerment postures, physical postures, and when I do affirmative prayer. That's a real, and visualization is a real self-care activity for me, as well as reading. And the last thing I fell in love with, I don't have an answer for the thing that I've fallen in love with. I have to think about that some more, the last thing. So I don't have an answer for that one.
All right. Is that Madeline beside you?
Yes, it is.
Hi, Jim and Madeline.
Hey, good evening. Good evening, Reverend Burnett. Good
Well, I was
evening.
focused on other things. Okay, so let's see. What's one thing that brings me energy and joy? Whenever I'm in front of a group, facilitating a group, I really get energy and a vibration actually from my interaction with the group as a whole and with individuals in the group. It brings me, I can be exhausted. I can have been on a plane traveling all night. And when I get in front of a group, I'm like awake, alive, aware. It just excites me and it energizes me. What makes me feel safe is knowing that I'm one with God, that I am one with God. I'm one with all people. So wherever I go in the world, I know I'm safe. And that I'm one with all life. I really, those sentences have come to mean so much to me. And I truly stand in each one of those. And I feel very safe. I feel very comfortable and very safe. My favorite self-care activity, my favorite one is being in the ocean, walking on a beach, just being, knowing that there's ground and there's water, and I feel comfortable in both of them.
Mm.
And the last thing I fell in love with was a painting that I did. And I looked at that painting and I thought, oh my God, I love this painting. I love it. And I think, I really saw it as part of me. And I love that painting.
That Madeline reminded me of a possible answer. I don't know if it's the last thing I fell in love with, but when she mentioned art, and I remember just falling in love with Van Gogh's work.
Yeah.
Feeling, I could feel the energy coming off of his work, out of his work to me, and that it was alive. And that's an amazing experience.
Yeah.
Abundantly wealthy Stan. Are you there?
I am here.
All right, Stan.
Hey, Stan, good evening, Stan.
Hey, Jim.
Hey,
Hey,
Stan.
Madeline, Reverend Burnett. How's everyone doing?
Awesome.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for asking, Stan.
Great.
Good, good. Well, let's see now. What brings me energy and joy? Well, the first thing is helping people. And I love helping people. What I do for a living is helping people with the health and wellness. But even I reflected back when my marriage had, my marriage had fallen apart, and I ended up having custody of my two youngest daughters. Just being able to do for them and provide for them was in a how would I put it, and really emphasized time of really helping people, which was the two of them, as well as trying to help myself, just recovering from that. But helping people, it actually brings me energy and joy and health and wellness. What makes me feel safe? Now that's interesting because most of the time I feel safe. And there are times when I've gotten scared, but my fear was not based on real danger, if you will. But what makes me feel safe is just knowing that, okay, God has a plan for my life and I haven't fulfilled my purpose. So I feel okay. And as a matter of fact, it just takes me way back years ago. Guess when I was in my 30s or so, no, maybe 40s, but I was jogging cross town from my house to my mom's house. And I saw a guy from high school. He was still in the service. And I'm jogging. I saw him. I said, hey, Eddie, and blah, blah, blah. He said, Stan, aren't you afraid to be jogging in this dangerous city? Because I'm from Newark, New Jersey. I was still living there at the time. And he said, because it's gotten really dangerous, not like when we were younger. I said, yeah. I said, but Eddie, I'm not afraid of this danger. God's not done with me yet. I just felt that, just stop there. My favorite self-care activity. Wow. I heard Reverend Burnett talk about getting a massage. I do like that, but I think it's when I'm really doing my martial arts and I'm really digging into getting my forms correct and the breathing, my Qigong breathing. That's one of my favorite self-care activities. But I really love the beach. I love being in the water, in the sun, getting a tan, especially when I can go somewhere in the wintertime and it's hot somewhere else and get that tan. And the last thing I fell in love with, I'm going to have to say myself. I had to learn how to do that. I was kind of too down on myself and lost my self-perspective and self-worth and realized I wasn't really loving myself. And when God put me into the whole fitness, health, and wellness arena, that's what I learned to do, how to fall in love with myself. And I'm complete.
All right. All right. Thank you, Stan. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Antonia.
Thank you.
Antonia?
Hey, you all hear me?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, I have my earbuds in. Thank you. So the first question, what brings me energy and joy? I would say just taking walks. Well, I'll say just being in the sun and just taking in all the like warmth and it's just absorbing all the rays and I think vitamin C or D, one of those. But it just makes me feel very comforted. And then what makes me feel safe, I think I can just get this from many sources, but just the feeling of being warm. So like when I describe love, it's usually a feeling of being warm and just having that feeling all over your body. So whether that's with my family or being in some physical location, I'm not really sure, but also like being in the presence of God, that also makes me feel warm. So that's why I just associate that with safety. Favorite self-care activity, definitely taking walks in the sun. So I'm not from LA, which is where I am now, from North Carolina. So having less rain, although it's been raining for the past few days here, it's just nice to take in the sun and things like that. It's being in fresh air. Well, yeah, fresh air. And then the last thing you fell in love with, I'm not really sure. It's a really good question. I've been mulling over it since we started, so I'm not really sure yet, but it's a really good question.
All right. Thank you. All right. Asia.
Hi. What's one thing that brings me joy? Okay, it'll be this work. Learning this, gaining the knowledge, because I'm really doing this for my babies. I want to leave a legacy for them, and it brings me joy to acquire this so I can pass it on to them. Gives me, like I said, it gives me energy because I feel like in the past year I've made so much progress in acquiring this knowledge and things. I've learned so much in the past few months, and it brings me joy. I'm not gonna lie, it's empowering, it's motivating, it's giving me more self-determination, all of those things. I feel like I have more of a purpose. What makes me feel safe? I guess I want to piggyback on what a few other people have said, like my spiritual connection and just knowing that I have that and trying to break generational curses and knowing that this work is all of this is going to make me safe, my family safe, my community safe, and a self-care activity. I would have to say being, like she said, being in the sun, Basically probably getting a massage. I don't know. There's a lot of things to do that I like for self-care. And then the last thing I fell in love with, I would have to say this. It's low-key becoming my new passion because it is so important. Like people talk about it, do a lot of people talk about it and they don't walk it and they don't breathe it. And everyone that I have met has inspired. Like I said in Pittsburgh, I was so inspired. It was like so meant for me to go. It re-sparked something in me, and it has always been in me. Like I said, it's been my passion. My teachers used to look at me. I used to get in trouble for questioning my African American history teachers. My daddy hated me because he'd be like, "Why the hell did you do this?" Like he had a book that was called His Story. What They Want You to Know. I used to take that and quiz everyone. Like, so this is just basically reiterating everything that was instilled in me, and I love it. Like I said, this is my new love, and I hope that I can go far in this. That's all I shall say.
All righty. Asada?
Hi, I'm here.
All right.
I'm here. See, I'm here in my community. We're having a community engagement session.
Okay.
Around comprehensively revitalizing our neighborhoods. And so I just want to say, this brings me joy, right? When my community is engaged, right? When we're not just talking about the problems, but we're talking about the solution. And we're getting involved and together. And how I take care of myself. My new thing is going to Korean spas. That's really great, right? There's a day spa, relaxation, hot baths, cold baths. And then I love playing dominoes. I love games, Foursquare, dominoes, spades, poker. I love poker. So I love games. I grew up playing games with my cousins and my family. And then I like a good nap. So I got a new bed. My little collaborator kept saying that the bed is making us sick, right? And I didn't buy it because, when you grow up, you just sleep on whatever you got, the pallet, the floor. But we got a new bed and it got a base, right, that lifts up and lifts back. And they got this thing called zero gravity where your feet go up and your head go down. It's like, it's my reward of the day to get in that bed and hit zero gravity. And then the last thing I like is a good old ginger beer. Like one ginger beer a day at night, that's my reward. So those are the things that bring me joy. And finally, being in Black cooperation is restoring, is renewing, is regenerating. It gives me life. It makes me feel that we're going to be okay. And even though it get rough, we got each other, even through the hard times. When you're in Black cooperation, you have each other. And whatever pain you're going through, there's this saying that joy shared is double, pain shared is half, right? And I had a rough day, but I was able to call my cooperators and talk it through with them, get some encouragement. And so, those are the things that bring me joy, and I do to take care of myself. Thank y'all.
All right. Eartha. Are you there? Well, okay. Well, let's move on to Eve then.
Hello. What brings me joy and energy? Definitely live music, concerts, small ones too. Good food, self-care activity, hiking in the sun. Yeah, I'm from LA, so it's been a little rainy lately, so I'm trying not to complain, but hiking gives me a lot of joy and being in the sun. What makes me feel safe? I've been kind of pondering that one. I liked, let's see, what Burnett said about the spiritual practice, and I forgot how she put it, but it's exactly my sentiment. But in terms of like other security, I think it's something I ponder about with the Black community, as the whole history of all the stuff we've been doing, and then you know, not really feeling safe. You know, they divert the water, they poison the water, they do this, they do that. So I feel safe, like spiritually and connected with the earth, but in terms of like the outside forces, that question took me to the larger Black community. And what's the last thing I fell in love with? Definitely this work. I mean, it's so crazy, you know, the long history. 1901, you see pictures of our people just doing so much. So falling in love with this work and knowing that there's a community that's, you know, been doing this, you know, just trying to get out all the lies about what we're not doing, what we haven't been doing, and just, you know, finding the joy and the passion in this work, and that there's so many like-minded people across the nation, worldwide. So, you know, just building the community now to keep doing what we've been doing for centuries. So thank you.
Thank you for sharing. Josie.
Hi, everyone. How is everyone doing?
Hi, Josie.
Hi. Those are really some great, thoughtful questions. So for me, one thing that brings me energy and joy is cooking a delicious meal that everyone enjoys. Helping my mom right now with her designing her new life in Florida. That gives me a lot of joy. And also, like when I'm home, if I'm upstairs and I hear my husband and my daughter downstairs and hear them laughing, that gives me a lot of joy. And also collaborating with other in creating safe spaces for people. That gives me a lot of joy. In terms of safety, the awareness and the consciousness that wherever I am, God is. That gives me safety, feel safe. For self-care, number one is walking. I love to walk, and especially preferably on the beach on a warm day. But even when it's cold outside, I still bundle up and go for a walk. If I don't do it, I feel like something is missing. So I have to go for a walk every day, and also deep breathing while I'm walking. So I am enhancing my self-care by walking and breathing at the same time. Stacking my self-care. Yes. So walking, deep breathing, and also journaling. I love to journal in the morning, and reading the daily inspiration from the Universal Foundation for Better Living. In terms of what I fell in love with, I have to say having alone time to reflect. Recently, having freedom and flexibility. That's what I fell in love with recently, and just having that time to reflect on my next level of greatness.
All right. Thank you, Josie. Lynn.
Yes. Well, one thing that brings me energy and joy is just this work, this community work. It just, over the years, it just drives me. It energizes me. All of the different types of work, whether or not I'm teaching GED classes. I always laugh and say, when I'm old and in a wheelchair, they're going to have to roll me into that classroom because I'm still going to be teaching those classes. But that work, you know, that community work, organizing and really mobilizing people to really create positive change is what gives me can't hear you. Energy, and it definitely gives me joy. Skip says, in the same vein that it brings me energy and joy, it's also very draining. And so it that self-care is something that I'm still grappling with. I don't always do a good job with taking care of me, although I do a good job of taking care of my community. And so that's something that I'm definitely working on. In terms of what makes me feel safe is definitely my faith. I really, that God has me. And I could really relate to the brother who was talking about the person that said to him, do you feel safe? Something similar happened to me when I was catching the bus, and we were on the bus stop, and a lady was like, aren't you nervous? And I was like, no, I'm not. You know, if it's my time to go, it's my time to go. But if not, God's got me, you know. And so I think my faith drives me to feel safe. What was the last thing I fell in love with? I would have to say I enjoy the water. I enjoy, and most recently I fell in love with the local community-wide swimming pool. I can't get to the ocean. My favorite place is the ocean, but the closest thing that I could get right now is to that swimming pool. And the next coming weeks is to go there more consistently, because I haven't been there in a while. But that water, that warm water, and that sauna afterwards at the Y sure feels good.
Hotep.
Okay, I'm back. Y'all ready for Miss Eartha?
Yes, yes.
Okay. What's the one thing that brings you energy and joy? Being the daughter of Ella Catherine Bailey, who had 6 children. I'm sorry, had 10 children, and I'm number 6. And it brings me energy because I'd be like, wow, I was so blessed to see someone that was able to achieve raising 10 great children. We all are well educated, got degrees, got businesses, got a lot of things going on for somebody that had 10, because I only got 1. So, that gives me energy, and the fact that I am capable of doing so many things, and I have done so many things. What makes you feel safe? I feel safe because I know that I'm on a mission. I know that I have purpose. I can see the light at the end of the tunnel. I'm almost feeling like that movie, The Book of Eli, where he knew where he was going, and don't care what got in his way. He was like, all the distractions, and just got him out of his way, because, you know, I know where I'm going. I know I see it. And I know my journey, again, at the end is the end. And what's your favorite self-care is the YMCA. They say, hey, do you live here? Because I go every day. If I don't do nothing but swim or sit in the sauna or chill, I go there every day. I swipe that little card. So I definitely do a lot of self-care and activities. I love dancing. That's why I just this month acquired my own restaurant / 2 venue halls. So now not only can I do self-care, I can be selfishly and plan all the things that I like to do right here at my establishment. What was the last thing you fell in love with? My accomplishments. You know, the older you get, the more you have to sit back and look at the things that you have done in your life. I'm 63 years old, and I have fell in love with all of my accomplishments. I don't even know how I did it myself, and it's me. I look back and like, well, I organized the Million Man March. I did all of this stuff. I got businesses. I'm on a radio show for 10 years. I got a lot going on, guys. And I'm just in love with the fact that I was able to sit back and see that I got a lot going on. And it feels good. It feels like even at 63, I'm just as excited about what I can do in the journey that I can accomplish. You know, people's like, as you get older, you get better. I think that is true. And you know, first because you know, they always get us old folks and they be like, oh yeah, you might not move as fast, so you might not do a lot of things you did when you were young, but man, do you do them better. Even getting up the chair, you know, I'll be getting up, even I have aching pains, I get up out that chair a little bit better than I did when I was 20 or 30 or 40. So yeah, I'm excited, and I'm loving, even like you said, being a part of this, seeing things that people are manifesting and putting together. And again, we'll too look back at this and be proud and excited.
All right. Elizabeth?
That would have been nice to record everything.
She typed hers in the chat. She says she's not able to talk.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So let's go with
I can go.
Okay.
Yes, sir. And I just want to highlight everybody's breakdown. Really appreciate it. I got babies with me, so I'm gonna try to make this quick. One thing that brings me energy and joy, you know, being a father, being a grandson, and actually like stepping up into that position. It's one thing to be called a man, but when opportunities presents itself and we don't shy away, but we press forward with confidence and love, it just makes me feel so great. And I can do that all day, even when it's tiresome, even though there's always something to do. When I follow through and I complete it, it just gives me even more joy and energy. I'm like, yeah, man. Yeah, man. What makes me feel safe? Being Black. Now, I know this is crazy because some people don't feel safe being Black. And I did used to attest to that as well. But I've gotten so confident in my Blackness. I understand that what we've been through, what they tried to do unsuccessfully, what we've done to ourselves, and still we rise. I know it's nothing that can touch me. And I know each and every one of us as Black individuals in the collective, we can make heaven or hell on this earth for anybody and for ourselves. I just choose to make heaven everywhere I go. So that made me feel safe. My favorite self-care activity is just being alone with the Most High. And you can do that while I heard, you know, getting a massage, while you're training. I do Jeet Kune Do, so working on the technique. I'm a coach when you're trying to instruct and people listen. It's always listening to that inner voice, that voice that's always been there with you. And sometimes it's light, and sometimes it's loud. But you know, that's my favorite self-care activity because it reminds me that I am not just myself. I am connected to something else that everyone else is connected to as well. Nobody's special, but we all perfect in our own individual and collective way. So that's my self-care reminder. And then what's the last thing you fell in love with? And my children, you know, they're growing. We had 3. I pray to get 10 more. But it seems like every time, you know, we're blessed with a new addition to the family. It's Lorraine, Kingdom, and Wisdom. Right now, Wisdom is the youngest. My heart just grows better. I find a deeper capacity to love. I find a deeper capacity to challenge myself to be a better father, a better brother, and a better man, and especially a better Black man. And I'm going to continue to just seek that out and through the blessings of my children. So, yeah, thank you. And I'll pass it. That's my time.
So thank you. Thank all of you for sharing. We're coming to the end of this session.
What about you, Ron?
Oh, great. Oh, thank you. Okay.
I would love to hear.
That brings me energy and joy is really being in spaces like this. Being able to share, collaborate. Just gives me energy and gives me joy. What makes me feel safe? Just knowing the truth. Just knowing the truth. And with that, I feel safe no matter where I go because I know the truth. What's your favorite self-care activity? Sleeping.
It's a good one.
Sleeping. Sleeping is my favorite self-care activity because I don't get enough sleep. So when I'm sleeping, yeah, that's my self-care activity. What the last thing I fell in love with? Wow. So much I fell in love with. But I have to say that it's my family. I fall in love with them every day. Watching my oldest son Some of you may know, but he's autistic and he's nonverbal. And every day I wake him up, he's smiling and he shows me love every day. And so,
Wow.
so yeah. So him and my wife and as well who tolerates me. So, and my daughter. So yeah. So yeah, it's about those are things. Those are the people I fall in love with every day.
Mm-hmm.
I find a new way to love them every day.
Yes. Beautiful.
So thank you for reminding me to step up and share my thoughts.
Ron, they probably have to find new ways to love you too every day.
Well, folks, we're at the end of this session. And so I will say this here, this is a learning lesson for me because we normally did this academy on Saturdays. And we did it for 3 hours on Saturdays. And so in planning this year, I said I wanted to try to do it during the week. So maybe I can have a Saturday to myself because I did it for Saturdays for 3 years. 3 years. And sometimes we did 2 and sometimes we did 3 academies. So that's 36 Saturdays out of the 54 weeks. So yeah, so this is really feels good. So we have a session next week on financials, and so so prepare for that. You'll get the recording of this session, and I'll send out to you some documents regarding preparation for next week's discussion on financing, on financial statements, reading them, understanding them, looking at budgeting. So yeah, so we'll travel that road next week. All right.
Sounds great. Sounds great.
All right. And so, does anyone have any last parting comments they'd like to make before we conclude for the evening?
I just want to say thank you. Yeah. Thank you for a wonderful session. Spirit feels culturally relevant. So thank you.
All right. Thank you, Asana.
Yes, thank you. Just wanted to say how much I appreciate all the history and the work that you did in pulling together that history, and it helped me to begin to connect in a different kind of way my experiences in all of those periods that I went through, and wasn't aware that a lot of what you presented was even going on in the background.
Yeah.
And I've been in the movement a long time.
Well, you know what? We're writing history now.
Yes.
We're writing a new history in terms of the movement around Black cooperatives. We're writing history as we speak right now. Yep. Yes. So yes, all of us.
Thank you so much.
Collectively, yeah. So folks, so we come to the conclusion of the first session. I've enjoyed it. Looking forward to the next 11 weeks. Anna, is there anything I'm missing? Okay.
I don't think so. I think that's it until next session. For there is one team left that has to send us over the registration materials.
Okay.
So, but when they can follow up with us, but then that's it. That's really it.
Okay. All right. And you're good. Well, folks, we'll stop here. Let you go ahead and do what you do. I'll see you next Thursday. All right.
All right. Thank you.
Have a great week. Good night. Blessings all.
Have a wonderful week.
Thank you.
Great call. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
A wonderful week.